It is like a tumor. It comprises all the random, uncontrolled thoughts that bubble into awareness from the subconscious. Consciousness is not mind. Awareness is not mind. Attention is not mind. Mind is an obstruction, an aggravation. It is a kind of evolutionary mistake in the human being, a primal weakness in the human experiment. I have no use for the mind. Sat in silence, breathing slowly. I didn't exactly know what to say. Soon enough, though, words came. You certainly have a unique perspective, Sock. I am not sure what you are talking about, but you sound really sincere. He just smiled and shrugged. Sock, I continued, do I cut off my head to get rid of my mind? Smiling, he said, that's one cure, but it has undesirable side effects. The brain can be a tool. It can recall phone numbers, solve math puzzles, or create poetry. In this way, it works for the rest of the body, like a tractor. But when you can't stop thinking of that math problem or phone number, or when troubling thoughts and memories arise without your intent, it's not your brain working, but your mind wandering. Then the mind controls you, then the tractor has run wild. I get it. To really get it, you must observe yourself to see what I mean. You have an angry thought bubble up, and you become angry. It is the same with all your emotions. They're your knee-jerk responses to thoughts you can't control. Your thoughts are like wild monkeys stung by a scorpion. Socrates, I think you think too much. I was just going to tell you that I'm really willing to change. That's one thing about me, I've always been open to change. That, said Socrates, is one of your biggest delusions. You've been willing to change clothes, hairstyles, women, apartments, and jobs. You are all too willing to change anything except yourself, but change you will. Either I help you open your eyes or time will, but time is not always gentle, he said ominously. Take your choice. But first realize that you're in prison, then we can plot your escape. With that, he pulled up to his desk, picked up a pencil, and began checking off receipts, looking like a busy executive. I got the distinct feeling I'd been dismissed for the evening. I was glad class was out. For the next couple of days would soon stretch to weeks. I was too busy, I told myself, to drop in and visit with Socrates. But his words rattled around in my mind. I became preoccupied with its contents. I started keeping a small notebook in which I wrote down my thoughts during the day, except for workouts, when my thoughts gave way to action. In 2 days I had to buy a bigger notebook. In a week, that was full. I was astounded to see the bulk and general negativity of my thought processes. This practice increased my awareness of my mental noise. I turned up the volume on my thoughts, that had only been subconscious background music before. I stopped writing, but still the thoughts fled. Maybe Sock could help me with the volume control. I decided to visit him that night. I found him in the garage, steam cleaning the engine of an old Chevrolet. I was just about to speak when the small, dark-haired figure of a young woman appeared in the doorway. Not even Sock had heard her enter, which was very unusual. He saw her, just before I did, and glided toward her with open arms. She danced toward him and they hugged, whirling around the room. For the next few minutes, they just looked into each other's eyes. Socrates would ask, "Yes," and she'd answer, "Yes." It was pretty bizarre. With nothing else to do, I stared at her each time she whirled by. She was a little over 5 feet tall, sturdy-looking, yet with an aura of delicate fragility. Her long black hair was tied in a bun, pulled back from a clear, shining complexion. The most noticeable feature on her face was her eyes, large, dark eyes. My gaping must have finally caught their attention. Socrates said, "Dan, this is Joy." Right away, I was attracted to her. Her eyes sparkled over a sweet, slightly mischievous smile. "Is Joy your name or a description of your mood?" I asked, trying to be clever. "Both," she replied. She looked at Socrates. He nodded. Then she embraced me. Her arms wrapped softly around my waist in a very tender hug. All at once I felt 10 times more energized than ever before. I felt comforted, healed, rested, and totally love-struck. Joy looked at me with her large, luminescent eyes, and my own eyes glazed over. "The old Buddha's been putting you through the ringer, has he?" she said softly. I guess so. Wake up, Dan." Well, the squeeze is worth it. I know, he got to me first. My mouth was too weak to ask for the details. Besides, she turned to Socrates and said, I'm going now. Why don't we all meet here Saturday morning at 10, and go up to Tilden Park for a picnic? I'll make lunch. It looks like good weather. Okay? She looked at Sock, then at me. I nodded dumbly as she soundlessly floated out the door. I was no help to Socrates for the rest of the evening. In fact, the rest of the week was a total loss. Finally, when Saturday came, I walked shirtless to the bus station. I was looking forward to getting some spring tan, and also hoped to impress Joy with my muscular torso. We took the bus up to the park, and walked cross-country over crackling leaves scattered in thick piles among the pine, birch, and elm trees surrounding us. We unpacked the food on a grassy knoll in full view of the warm sun. I flopped down on the blanket, anxious to roast in the sun, and hoped Joy would join me. Without warning, the wind picked up and clouds gathered. I couldn't believe it. It had begun to rain, first a drizzle, then a sudden downpour. I grabbed my shirt and put it on, cursing. Socrates only laughed. How can you think this is funny? I chided him. We're getting soaked, there's no bus for an hour, and the food's mine. Joy made the food. I'm sure she doesn't think it's so. Joy was laughing too. I'm not laughing at the rain, Sock said. I'm laughing at you. He roared, and rolled in the wet leaves. Joy started doing a dance routine to Singing in the Rain. Ginger Rogers and the Buddha. It was too much. The rain ended as suddenly as it had begun. The sun broke through and soon the food and clothes were dry. I guess my rain dance worked. Joy took a bow. As Joy sat behind my slumped form, and gave my shoulders a rub, Socrates spoke. It's time you began learning from your life experiences instead of complaining about them, or basking in them, Dan. 2 very important lessons just offered themselves to you. They fell out of the sky, so to speak. I dug into the food, trying not to listen. First, he said, munching on some lettuce, neither your disappointment nor your anger was caused by the rain. My mouth was too full of potato salad for me to protest. Socrates continued, regally waving a carrot slice at me. The rain was a perfectly lawful display of nature. Your upset at the mine picnic and your happiness, when the sun reappeared, were the product of your thoughts. They had nothing to do with the actual events. Haven't you been unhappy at celebrations, for example? It is obvious then, that your mind, not other people or your surroundings, is the source of your moods. That is the first lesson. Swallowing his potato salad, Sock said, the second lesson comes from observing how you became even more angry when you noticed that I wasn't upset in the least. You began to see yourself compared to a warrior - 2 warriors, if you please. He grinned at Joy. You didn't like that, did you, Dan? It might have implied a change was necessary. Sat morosely, absorbing what he'd said. I was hardly aware that he and Joy had darted off. Soon it was drizzling again. Socrates and Joy came back to the blanket. Socrates started jumping up and down, mimicking my earlier behavior. Goddamn rain. He wailed. Here goes our picnic. He stomped back and forth, then stopped in mid-stomp and winked at me, grinning mischievously.